Hi, everybody. It's Meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Monday, the 7th of January, 2019. And we have a pretty busy setup for tonight with the light precipitation that's going on here in the east. When I say busy, I mean we have a lot to cover tonight with our weather, both short and in the long range. We've got a weak system that is moving through the northeast. That is producing some light precipitation, and we have some various winter weather advisories that are up. We also have changes going into later this week that will bring down temperatures, at least into the eastern part of the United States. We've got the possibility maybe of some snow over the weekend as we watch another low coming out of the southern stream in this split flow jet stream pattern, and we're going to also look at the longer range going forward. Offers some, always fascinated as how the long range evolves over the course of days. And I always say this, so say it again, just try and stay focused more on the overall pattern rather than taking a look at every single model run and trying to just kind of emotionally go on that. We'll try and recognize what the weather pattern is, and it'll make it easier to figure out what the weather's actually going to be like as we move down the road. Also, we will be talking about Europe and what's going on there. Some of our viewers have been joining us from across the Atlantic and very interested in what's happening there because it's all sort of wrapped up in everything that's been going on in the Northern Hemisphere lately with regards to the split in the polar vortex in the stratosphere. And trying to think of, there's probably a few other subjects that we're going to touch on as we go through the night. But let me just start off. We'll start with the wide view here. You can see the winter weather advisories that are up for much of Pennsylvania except the western part and the southeastern part, and also for the northern half of New Jersey, with the exception of the counties surrounding New York City, the lower Hudson Valley. They've added a couple of extra counties in the last hour or so, and then just about all of New York State is under a winter weather advisory. Western Connecticut, parts of Massachusetts, you're going to see those spots fill in Vermont, New Hampshire, and then back up through Maine. And we, of course, have to have the obligatory daily winter storm watch up for the northern counties of Maine, where there's probably going to wind up being another sizable snowfall there. Wind issues across the plains. Winter weather advisories up in the northern Rockies and extending into the state of Washington and Oregon. Weather's kind of calmed down a little bit in California, where we were dealing with winter storm warnings and rain most of this weekend. And now we've got some wind issues there, also some wind issues, as I said, back up through the plain states while all these weather systems just continue to move their way through. So let's bring this down, and we'll go to the satellite loop and take a look at what's happening. So, we've got this warm air that's moving in to the east. We have a warm front that's pushing northward, and we're seeing clouds that rapidly increase today over my neck of the woods, and a couple of bursts of precip ahead of the warm front before this whole system starts to push away to the east. Now, this is eventually going to be the catalyst. There's actually two lows here that are in play. The first low going by tonight into early tomorrow morning, then a second low with the cold front tomorrow night. That one's going to intensify into a fairly sizable storm in eastern Maine and over New Brunswick and Nova Scotia come Wednesday and Thursday. This is going to be the driver of bringing cold air down from northern Canada and bringing it down into the Great Lakes and the Northeast. Especially after, from Wednesday. Wednesday's going to be the first day when you're going to start to see this come in on gusty winds, and then we're going to gradually bring even colder air for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday. This is our first real long stretch of below average temperatures since going back to November. Even though we did have days of below average temperatures, they weren't terribly far below. This is actually going to feel like wintertime here as we go through later this week, this weekend, and the very start of next week. And meanwhile, we continue to see some moisture getting ready to pile back into the west. Another system out in the Pacific Ocean is going to start sending energy eastward. And, of course, you've got this it looks like this almost semi-permanent feed of tropical moisture coming from the Pacific down across the south. That southern jet wants to stay busy, and I think that's going to be an important factor to consider when we get into the long range. So right now, with respect to tonight's event that's going on in my area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, not really anticipating a whole lot in terms of snowfall here. We're really talking about at most a coating to an inch or so. Just not really seeing this as being a big issue with regards to accumulation. It's just that there's going to be a lot of slick spots that are going to come out of all of this, and that plus the fact that I think that the threshold for winter weather advisories has been taken down ever since that November 15th debacle. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the new threshold is, but apparently it seems like now, if it looks like it's going to be even the least bit slippery, we're going to cover for it. And they were salting and brining, which is certainly appropriate. You can see the temperatures, by the way, really struggled today, barely making it back to the freezing mark. One of the things I have noticed and picked up on the models for much of the last couple of months is and I've had a few other people in other places of the country point this out as well. They have overwarmed in many instances and not been cold enough with some of these colder air masses that we have seen from time to time. So that's a very interesting perspective to hold on to as we start to deal with perhaps weather systems where temperatures are going to become, for some areas, could very well be a critical issue. I have a hot chocolate in here with me tonight. So that was that little slight pause and maybe a little bit of gulping that you might have heard. So we're all below freezing. You can see in the purple area the winter weather advisories and all the counties that cover it through upstate New York. The temperatures in the teens and 20s as you go further north, and low teens and even some single digits. Montreal is at 10. Up in Quebec City is at 1 above. We've got 19 at Halifax right now. Fredericton is at 7. St. John, New Brunswick is at 9. Moncton is 10. Prince Edward Island at 21. Just checking out some of the temperatures here out and around Newfoundland. We're in the teens and 20s, so it's very cold here. And the air, as it drained down from northeastern Canada, some of these temperatures here, you're seeing below zero readings. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Shibogamu? I don't, excuse me if someone was maybe watching from up there, please correct me on the pronunciation if possible. And then back in the U.S., you also can see on the other side of the warm front where temperatures are in the 40s. Look at these temperatures in Ohio and in southern Michigan in the 50s here, and through Indiana and Illinois in the mid to upper 50s. We've got low 60s down through Kentucky and Tennessee. So no doubt that we've got a rather sharp warm front here, and you can see it on the latest surface map from 4 o'clock this afternoon. The cold high pushing down from eastern Canada through New England, down through the New Jersey coast, down into Virginia, North Carolina, and then you've got the warm front that separates all these 20s and 30s from 50s and 60s. And we're going to have to wait. There's actually two fronts to deal with here. There's going to be this warm front's going to come through. Tomorrow temperatures are going to be warmer here. We should be well up into the 40s. Then we're going to have the first cold front come through tomorrow night with some slightly colder air behind it, but not too cold because temperatures are in the 30s and 40s throughout the plains at the moment. But it's the secondary front that is now moving into northwestern North Dakota and northern Montana. So behind here in Canada, we are seeing temperatures down in the single digits, below zero, and even colder as we go further north. So that is going to be the source region for the next high that is going to be building in to the east and is going to set the table with regards to the weather for the latter part of this week, this weekend, and the first part of next week. 7 o'clock radar showing a narrow band of snow and sleet on the light side. The air is so bone dry that this afternoon, when this band moved across Pennsylvania, we could see the sleet on it, and those bright yellow patches you see. It was a fairly solid area. If you looked at the radar, you might have thought that it was snowing really hard in some places or sleeting very hard. Well, some places did get sleet, but the air was so bone dry that a lot of this just evaporated before it hit the ground. So there was probably a blizzard going on at about 1,500 feet or somewhere in that vicinity somewhere in that vicinity. And then it all just evaporated before it hit the ground. Anyway, that first band is moving northeastward. It's a band that some of the short-range weather models today did not handle very well. The HRRR has had it all along. The NAM has not handled this well. And then we have the second area of precip back through western Pennsylvania. This is where the real warm front is, and that's going to come through during the early morning hours until daybreak, and it's from this we'll probably get a bit of a mix. So behind that, we've got rain showers with that warm air going up all the way into northern Michigan. You saw those temperatures in the 50s and 60s. And as far as the rest of the country is concerned, a little bit of light precip back through western South Dakota and Nebraska. A little bit of light shower activity starting to come into parts of northern California as the next storm starts to rev up there off the west coast and will begin to move its way inland. Okay, so I want to touch upon the weather in Europe and show you what the upper air is doing here, because it is directly related to what we're dealing with. And we are going to, from this, then go and talk about what we see going forward in our area, in the United States, and what we think the overall weather pattern is going to be. So just a quick map check here. We'll do a little bit of drawing. Let me bring up the paint board. And hello. Where are you? Hang on one second, folks. There we go. So here is the map of the upper air across Europe, and what we have is a big high that is continuing to just sit here off the south coast of England and Ireland, and just east of France and just west of France and northwest of Portugal. I'm so used to always going, referencing the west is coming here, and I have to remember it's the other way around when I get to Europe, because it's the coastline. There's more land than water than what I'm used to. So you've got this big upper high that's sitting out in the Atlantic. Here Ireland is to the northeast of it, so is England, France to the east, and you've got Portugal and Spain to the southeast. Again, as you go northeast of England, we've got an upper low that is sitting over Norway and Sweden, and another upper low over the Black Sea. So the flow of air is basically coming down from the Arctic region and then sweeping around and down into the Mediterranean, particularly the eastern part of the Mediterranean here, getting into some very, very cold air. In the meantime, pretty much west of this black line, it's dry, not too much is happening, and it's been like this for a while. The emphasis of the cold so far has been more towards southern Europe, down in the areas around Italy, for example, and also in through Central and Eastern Europe and going into Siberia. We are going to see this change over the next coming weeks, because the upper air pattern, as that whole split that we had in the polar vortex, that entire split has completed itself, and now we're going to have a secondary split with another strong upper low that's going to form over southwestern Europe. But over time, the deep trough is going to actually strengthen, and another deep trough drops down into southern Europe, down into the Mediterranean. So this is going to be another blast of cold air that moves down into that region. They got snow from the last blast. Then that pulls out, still dealing with this ridge that's off of east to the west of Ireland, but that upper high is going to break down, and as it breaks down, gradually you're going to get more and more troughing coming in further and further to the west, and that's going to bring for colder shots of air as we get into the long range. It's still going to take another week to 10 days for this to all play out, but eventually it does get there, especially later in the forecast period when you have this deep trough and strong flow that is coming down from the Arctic regions. And in fact, when we look at the models on the surface, on the GFS, you can see it play out pretty well. There's a strong storm that is in the North Sea at the moment that is dropping southward and going to bring big snows to Germany and parts of Poland. Then down further south, you've got a system that's coming out of the Mediterranean, a little bit of snow there in Italy on the first couple of frames, and then that lifts up to the northeast. And now as you get that next trough to come down, you start to see, you see how all the waves of rain, moisture are to the east. Gradually, as we get toward, now we're into the week of January 14th, you've lost that ridge, you're getting more of that deep trough along the west coast of Europe. You start to see colder air coming in, possibilities for some snow here showing up in England and Ireland, and on up also into France, and eventually into Spain. And that is going to continue as we go forward into the long range for you folks in Europe. And in fact, we can take a look. I think it's really important that, even though obviously most of my audience, I know most of you are not in Europe, but I think it's important to take a look at the weather pattern there, because oftentimes if we've got a blocking high that's sitting over Ireland or over England or just to the west of there, that is impacting our weather here in the U.S. in terms of the overall jet stream flow. And as far as snowfall goes, this is over 10 days. So we can't see beyond what the model is thinking beyond January 17th, but for the next 10 days, that's a fairly significant snowfall for much of Europe, with the exception of the west. So we've got to wait for that ridge to break down to increase your snow chances, and I think that will come after another 10 days or so. And we'll continue to watch and see how the models trend out in all of this going forward. Now, all of this, of course, thanks to Le Vortex Polar, or the polar vortex split. We're going to look up in the upper atmosphere, way up where the planes fly, folks, and we're going to take a look at the latest goings on here. I am still, I'm still learning how this all works, and kind of really enjoying myself watching this all evolve. It'll be great for future reference, because you always take on your past experience and hope that you can apply it in the future. But here we are on Monday, January 17th, as far as how it looks like up in the stratosphere. We've got two vortices, one sitting in northwestern Europe, the other one sitting right over the northeastern part of the U.S. And as we move through time, what happens is that you've got a third vortex that splits off, and you see it there right off of over Portugal, while the vortex in North America just kind of sits there and pulses away over Hudson Bay and remains there through the 10-day period. And it kind of looks like, by the time we get to the latter part of the forecast period, I could be wrong on this, but if you look at how the three vortices just kind of couple together here, the one in Siberia couples with the one in Europe, and then there's sort of a broad coupling with the one over North America. Now, I'm going to pose this question to folks that know more than I do about what this might mean in the longer term, and let's see what kind of an answer we get back over the next few days. I'm going to message a couple of friends of mine, and we're going to try to get Dr. Judah Cohen on in the next couple of days, waiting to hear back from him to see what's a good a time and date for him. But if we can't do it this week, we'll do it first chance we get. So back we go with the upper air. Let's move ahead through this week, and I want to illustrate that the overall pattern that we're dealing with is actually rather simple with regards to what may or may not happen when we get to the end of this week and into this weekend. And for some reason, okay, let's see. Round and round it goes, folks. Trying to get this to work. Hang on one second. See if that did it. This was a little stuck. Okay. So watching the upper air pattern evolve over the United States. We are this is for tomorrow. We have a ridge that's built up from an upper high that is sitting down in Mexico and is built northwestward on up into western Canada, corresponding trough from the northern Great Lakes down into the mid-Atlantic states. And that is going to start to bring in some cold air here into the east beginning on Wednesday, but you'll really feel it Wednesday night, Thursday, and beyond. And then we start to get the beginnings of what may or may not be the next weather event for the weekend. First thing I want you to look at, watching the upper right, that upper low doesn't really go very far, and it starts to lift up, and then part of it rotates back around. Okay, so now let's hold that thought, go back out to the west, and now look at the lower left. You've got energy that's coming in the southern part of the jet stream. You can see it here. This is for Thursday night. There's this trough that is right down from Utah on into toward the Baja Peninsula, and that starts to move to the east. So as we move through time and we get into late Saturday, this actually does look something like what we went through back in December. If you recall, we had the system that impacted the mid-Atlantic states, the big snowstorm there, and this there's a similar thread here that runs through both the systems in terms of the upper air, and I think it also will mean, the similar dilemma and trying to figure out where this goes from the standpoint of the forecast. This is very simple. You have this northern jet, okay, that is running down from Canada, from central Canada across the northeast. And there is a short wave, there's one here that's trying to rotate around. Then you have the southern jet, where it's basically a series of short waves that are running across the southern tier. And you see them here. Well, there's two of them. And very interestingly, this is a new development that the models have keyed on. Because you have this split flow, you've got an upper high, and that separates the jet in the west. This is very important as it's part of the breakdown that we've been talking about in terms of the jet across the Pacific. Instead of having screaming winds coming west to east from the Pacific into the western part of the United States and then going all the way across, now you've got this upper high that's kind of deflecting that, and that's really important. So we've got this split flow, and as we said this last week, nothing really has changed very much in terms of how we were going to deal with this weather system for the weekend, and that is, how do all these shortwave troughs, how do they time out? And by the way, what we can't see is probably another upstream shortwave trough in the flow that's coming down from Canada. So it really becomes a matter of these short waves timing out in a certain way that creates the model. The model then decides whether, how it develops a low and where it takes it. And in this late afternoon run, for example, you've got the short waves. Well, you've got that northern shortwave trying to come out, but it sort of squashes the south to some degree until it gets well offshore and then out. And that is certainly a possibility here that the north would overwhelm. Let me go back a couple of runs to yesterday. Actually, it'll be this run is probably as good as any. This is yesterday's upper air for the same time frame. Let me back it up. So the GFS had really a very difficult time yesterday even showing a northern stream shortwave. You could see the southern stream shortwave down in Texas and off into the northwest Gulf, but it just basically gets lost. It just, the north is almost, you really can't even find it. It just sort of overwhelms with a strong northwest flow. And then late yesterday afternoon, we began to see a bit of a change in the model's view, in that it really did show a definable shortwave there in the north, swinging down and around, still kind of squashed it. But then last night on the 0Z run, you had almost a full phase here. So the only difference that you're seeing from run to run, this is the only difference in that everything just times out differently. And this is going to be very, very important. You're not going to get, you're going to have to wait at least until later Wednesday at the earliest before we can get a real idea of how all these, as we can get a better, at least a better fix in terms of the timing of all these short waves. The next run, by the way, overnight, last night, kind of actually phased it a little faster and deeper, so that you wound up with a low tracking further to the left. Then the day run came in, and it really didn't phase it all that much. There was enough phasing to energize the southern system, but not too much to bring it up to the west and then out. And then we have the new run, which was a little bit more suppressed from the day run. That's why, like I said, when you make these, make an observation to say the run the run shows nothing. The run killed it. It doesn't change what the overall plan of attack is here as far as what the upper air is concerned. Today is Monday. We're talking about an event for Sunday. That's 6 days from now. That's plenty of time for weather models to maneuver and change to what reality is going to be. The timing here of all these short waves is going to be very, very important. And that's it. And you know what? If tonight's run comes in and makes a snowstorm, I would be as skeptical of it as if it came in tonight and it didn't, because you're not going to get clarity at least for another couple of days yet. So here's how it looks on the surface map for going forward. And the one thing that is clear is that it is going to be cold here for the second half of this week into the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states. This big high is building down north of Lake Superior. That's a big, that's a strong high there, 1047 high north of Lake Superior. That's a lot of low-level cold air that's going to be coming into the east. I can envision a couple of days where I am, where temperatures don't get out of the 20s, maybe Friday and Saturday, with that high the way it is and that flow coming down from northeastern Canada. This is how we see New York and New England get to some of their coldest temperatures sometimes in the winter. So here's your low that the model, again, brings snows down. If it's going to be a more suppressed look, you're probably going to have more energy to deal with down in the mid-Atlantic states. Now, how much we have is something I think is also going to be a short-range question. I don't know if this is overdone by the models or not, but that moves out to the northeast. The European, the Canadian, they're all similar in terms of what the issue, what we're dealing with is an issue in the upper air. Where they differ is the timing of the short waves and whether they phase or don't phase or suppress or don't suppress. And then that goes out. And let's take a look at the long term. I want to go to the Pacific upper air at the moment, because the big issue, if you recall, was that screaming jet coming in from the Pacific. And the difference now is that you're starting to see, troughs and ridges in between. It's not like a straight ruler all the way across. So you're not getting that screaming straight jet from Asia all the way into the West Coast. You got, actually, if you look at this, it's screaming from Asia up to about Hawaii, and then you've got this big upper low that is forecast to lock itself away off the West Coast. And that allows the ridge to build up into the west and northwest, which allows the troughing in the east. Now, the key is, are we going to maintain that to some degree in the long term? And when we look at the GFS in the long term, it does appear that, I haven't, this is my first look this far out into the long range, but it does seem that we are seeing indeed that fact that the screaming Pacific jet is going to be gone as we move through the forecast period. If you look across North America, in Western North America, big ridge in the west, fairly deep trough that develops in the east in the long haul. And the model's been doing this for a few runs of varying degrees of strength. But the overall trend to me is clear that we are going to be able to get an established polar flow coming down from Canada in the longer haul. It may not be every single day straight. There will always be periods of relaxation as systems reload and rotate around, and new troughs form, old troughs lift out, new ones drop in. But as long as we can as long as that Pacific jet is not screaming across the entire Pacific Ocean from Asia to North America, that allows opportunities for cold air to set up in the long term. So, I'm still fairly bullish on a colder than average weather pattern overall. Certainly this week, starting from with colder air starting to come back in on Wednesday, but particularly from Thursday right through next Monday, I think we're going to see temperatures running well below normal, and we're going to have to take a look at how everything comes out with regards to that southern jet stream and the northern jet and how they time out. Take a look at snowfall for the next 10 days. Let's not focus on the numbers, but just in terms of the extent. And you can see the impact of this particular model run. Let me get this a little bit bigger for you. There you go. So rather than focus on some of the numbers that are printed out, I think the more important thing is to look at the southernmost extent, for example, of where the snow is, both in the west and in the east. And depending as you go look from run to run, you're going to have some runs producing higher numbers in some areas in one run, and then the next run they come in lower. But the overall look here is that there's going to be a fair amount of snowfall distributed across the U.S. over the next 10 days, and most likely beyond that. And when we look at total accumulated precip over the next 10 days, you can see that the emphasis is going to be across the Gulf states, the lower Mississippi Valley into the Tennessee Valley, and toward the southeast, but not so much in Florida. And then it kind of tails off a little bit over parts of the northeast, but again, that will all depend on track. Very, very wet in the west, up and down several to many inches from San Diego right along the immediate coast, from San Diego all the way up into Washington. We have some of our YouTube watchers that are from British Columbia who have told me that the rains that they've been seeing with this screaming Pacific jet, the way it's been, has been just insane. Some of the worst they've ever seen in that region. So the dominating Pacific jet has created consequences from the standpoint of heavy rain from the northwestern part of the U.S. on northward. California actually was getting a break from this for a little while because of where the jet actually was. But now if that southern part of the jet is active enough, more and more rain is going to be coming to the central and southern part of the state, as opposed to eventually, and there still will be plenty of rain as you go north and on up the coast. Mostly dry as you go up through the northern plains. You'll notice it in the northern Rockies. So part of this is the impact of a ridge that is building up in the northern Rockies and on up into the northwestern part of Canada. That split flow, if you look at the outline of the precip, you can actually pick out the split flow where you've got moisture in California down into Southern California, across the Southwest, and then through the Gulf states south of 35 north. And then you have the action with the northern jet, so you've got all this precip that's being generated through southeastern Canada and on up into northern New England. And of course, the ridge is where you've got the drier air up in the northern Rockies and on up into the Pacific Northwest. You can you can look at any map, be it precip or temperature anomalies, and you can figure out where the what the upper flow is just by looking at those maps. I don't even have to show you a jet stream map. I can show you these other two, and we can we can figure out what's actually happening. So that pretty well sums it up, folks, as far as the weather going forward in the long range. Again, don't come to any. I guess I want everybody to be their own forecaster, okay? But I want you to kind of get away from reading the model runs too literally. Start, the thing to do is you want to recognize the pattern of what's going on in the upper air. And we now know clearly what that is. And we know that the models are going to jump around. They're going to be further south, further north. And it's going to be doing that for another couple of days. So I think Wednesday night, when we do our Wednesday night YouTube, I think we should have some clarity on where this is all going to wind up for Saturday night and Sunday. Are we going to deal with something more robust and further north, or is it going to be more suppressed and further to the south? So we got a lot of time to watch that. Angelo C. Again, remember, the European back a few days ago had a rather intense low south of Cape Cod, and had 20 to 30 inch amounts in parts of Long Island and southern New England. That has now flipped to the other direction, where today it gave a coating to a couple of inches to parts of Virginia and North Carolina, and then took the low well out to the east-northeast. It barely even had the low on its run. I think it was Saturday night. It hardly had any kind of low at all. You could barely find it. So I'm just trying to get everybody to just stop emotionally jumping from run to run, because I guarantee. Look, if tonight's runs come in, and actually we're going to go back and look at the parallel GFS because we should have enough of that now. If the overnight runs tonight and tomorrow, if they come out and print the snowstorm for much of the northern mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, as I said earlier, I would guarantee you that I would be just as skeptical of that as I would if it were the other way. Why is it when we get rainstorms, it rains for 8 to 12 hours when it's cold enough for snow and only for about 4 to 6 hours? Well, because honestly, getting it to snow is not an easy thing to do. It's on the northwest side of the storm, which, when you look at a storm and its track, that probably cuts the smallest area of geography. Where that rule, what you just mentioned, doesn't apply is in overrunning situations where you could have these sort of long duration events, or if you're dealing with a cutoff low. But we also remember we get rain more frequently than we do snow, because it rains. It only can snow. You only really see snow most times in general, 4 months out of the year: December, January, February, March, with a few exceptions. Obviously, this year in November, some years in April. But those 4 months, you see rain all 12 months of the year. So you see far more rain events than you do snow events. And I can tell you that, you see a number of rain events too that happen that only last for a couple of hours. So you wait for those that are produced by major storms, and you don't have that many of those that you can hold on to as an example. Plus, if you're a snow lover, you just automatically think that when it rains a lot longer than it does when it snows. Also, the fact that you can forecast rain 8-10 days out, and it happens, but you can't forecast snow 10 days out with any kind of reliability, because you are going to probably wind up getting burned. So let's take a look at the parallel GFS today and see what that did, the new parallel GFS, and see if we are suppressing, or are we perhaps phasing a bit more. So we'll make this map just a little bit wider, and we'll run it by. So here's tonight and tomorrow. Here comes the cold air for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Big high to the north. Beautiful surface pattern, by the way. Well, we've got snow Friday night into northern Illinois. And here's your low in northern Louisiana. northern Mississippi, central Tennessee. So by Saturday evening, we've got snow up into New Jersey and almost into southern New England. Low redevelops along the North Carolina coast, is off the New Jersey coast, and then runs up to just south of Cape Cod. So it's got a less suppressed look here, not an overly developed low, which is probably a good thing because that'll hold the cold air in, and runs it up to the northeast into the Gulf of Maine. So a less suppressed look on this run. So let's take a look at what the upper air is and see if we can match it up and see why. All right, so there's your southern shortwave. Now let's go look at the upper right. You can see the shortwave in the north kind of comes around. That southern stream gets lost a little bit, and then it's really just the north that comes around. So it's getting, again, it's the terms of timing with these shortwaves and what it does. So now it wants to have all this energy down in the north. It's going back to what it did yesterday, and then that lifts out. It's going to stay cold into early next week. Ridge doesn't really build that much into the east. It gets flattened because there's another shortwave coming right behind it along about Wednesday night, Thursday. Another southern stream system here with a northern stream system coming around. There's a rhyme to these systems. If you look, there is similarity here with this split flow and that southern energy just kind of moving along. If you time the short waves right, this is for the end of next week, so we're talking about January 18th, 19th. Very interesting upper air pattern. Look at this. Very interesting going into the long haul. Let's look at the wider view. Roll it back. All right, so here's Thursday, Friday. You can see the upper air. This is for Saturday, so a little bit of southern energy comes out, and then you got this northern stream shortwave just sort of energizes it as it moves to the east. Another shortwave behind it. I don't really see it getting that warm after this weekend. I mean, again, it may warm up for a day, barely, and then you still got, what's persistent now is this flow out of Canada. It doesn't really go away. And the Pacific, again, you don't have that screaming jet anymore. And that's so important in terms of the overall long-term pattern. Flow is very split out in the Pacific toward the end of the period, too. You've got upper highs running from the Gulf of Alaska westward over the Aleutians to the international date line. The jet in the Pacific is displaced all the way south. That's pretty interesting. Higher than normal pressures all across the Arctic region, so that gives us a negative Arctic oscillation, and I think there's probably a negative NAO here as well. Very interesting upper pattern here going forward into the long haul. Again, it's out 384 hours. I know it's probably not going to verify like this, but just the idea that it keeps kind of going to a signature like this in the long term, to me, is very, very interesting and very, very important. The Euro upper air looks too steep and not deep enough. I missed that discussion. Okay, you're talking up. All right, where though, Brandon? If we go back to the Euro today, one thing I thought about the Euro today was the Euro was actually even colder than the GFS going forward. But here's the situation for the end of the week. It's the European really kind of overwhelms the North. And really squashes that southern shortwave, but it still has another shortwave timed out coming down, and it just times it differently. We could have this timed differently on the next run. I guarantee you it probably will be. But overall, to me, the Europeans' look going out to the 10-day period is even colder than the GFS, in my opinion, for what it's worth. And some people don't think it's worth very much. I have a lot of folks taking the time out to insist that the Pacific jet is going to never break down again. Never is a pretty long time. All patterns break down. No pattern lasts forever. Correct, Ryan. If you remember correctly, back in January of 2016. When we got the big blizzard in the Northeast, the models were very consistent as much as 8 days prior. They were consistent in the broad sense. that is correct. But as I recall, the European was on that one was very suppressed, and it only at the very end did it finally actually produce a little bit of accumulating snow for the coastal Northeast, while the other models were more robust for New York City and for Long Island and New Jersey. The European did not do well in that January 16th storm, but the models kind of had this broad picture in the long range, much like they have it now. But as always, they argue with the details, and I think you're going to see, this argument that we're seeing now is going to continue for at least another 2 and possibly 3 days. We may push that on into Thursday before we get an idea. I would just like to remind everybody respectfully, please, no politics on my page. I'm just not gonna. I just don't want it. So can we, not do that? All right. So no politics. I just don't want it here. We're going to talk weather. You want to talk politics? There's a whole bunch of other channels that you can go to and do that, but just don't do it here. Okay. Let's see. Ethan B. Northwest U.S. ridge builds later in the period of split flow. Agreed. Northern cold branch swinging down to Pacific and Gulf moisture will come into play for storm enthusiasts. I think that makes total sense. I totally agree with that observation. Snow in all 50 states. Is it possible? Very rare. San Francisco, Miami, Honolulu ruin it though. Ronald Martinez, that's not exactly when they say snow in all 50 states. They're not looking at San Francisco, Miami, and Honolulu. Okay. Actually, there's snow in Hawaii, on the Big Island, at the top of the volcano. So they look at that. And in Florida, it does happen in the Florida Panhandle under certain circumstances. So it can happen, and it's not as difficult as it sounds. You just have to have the right weather pattern to produce it. If you count, just because there's no snow on the ground in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Honolulu doesn't mean that there isn't snow in all 50 states. Let's see. That was a good. By the way, Ethan Bean, that was a good observation with respect to the overall pattern. Jess Harden, I know you desperately want snow in Alabama. You're going to need this cold. Look, the pattern that we have evolving is certainly a lot better than what you would have if you had a screaming jet going across from the Pacific from west to east. Although that usually means cooler than normal temperatures down in the southern part of the United States, but that's all relative because your normals are so much higher. But you need some cold air intrusion from the north. At least you're going to get it to some degree with the weather pattern going forward. Now, how far south it gets, I don't know. That's a big question. But you usually get that one chance every winter of some snow across the deep south. It hasn't come yet. But it might come later in the month of January and going into February when that northern pattern is going on. Okay, so Raider Nation, as I just said, you no politics on this page, so you're gone. Let's see. Just running, make sure the storm for Sunday gets into the west. Ask Ryan Ford on land. Will that make the models less volatile? Probably. I'm sure it will. That's always in every case. Once we get closer to the time frame and when the storms come onto the west coast and you get a better sense of data sampling. I'm just wondering. A few people. I did read somewhere that a couple of Weather Service stations are not sending up soundings, that they're out of helium. There's a helium shortage, and they can't send up balloons. And apparently, having worked in the federal government, it's not a simple thing of going to another office and borrowing their helium. There's about 100 forms involved to get that helium from one place to another. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Whether that has impact on the models or not, I don't know. I would just say this. it doesn't change what the problem is. And if we had all the data and everything working at 100%, you still would be sitting here having the same conversation with regards to whether something is too far north or too far south. So I'm not, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We still know what the problem is. We still know that the models aren't going to resolve this until we get closer, and at least we know what to look for. So that gives us a leg up in terms of trying to figure out where this is all going to go in the longer term. Bramio, welcome aboard. I'm excited for what's to come. I live right on the coast of North Carolina. It's been a long time since you've had a good snow. Well, you know what? If that's the case, you're going to want that suppressed look. The more suppressed it is, you got the high up in eastern Canada, so you're going to get cold air that's going to drain southward. I don't know how much, you get that. It's all about the wedge when you get down into North Carolina, and when the cold air wedges into the mountains, you've got the high in a fairly good position there. So if you wind up with a more suppressed look with that southern system, then yeah, you might have a shot. But the folks that are up in the further north are hoping that it's not as suppressed as what some of the models are showing. Rick, 8013, telling me that they're still doing upper air soundings from MHX in eastern North Carolina, which is very good to hear. Yeah, I read that somewhere. I forgot what station it was. It was just, we're talking about some helium shortage, and that was apparently a problem. Higher ratios possible, asked Howard Vanderhoff. I have to tell you, Howard, I think Saturday here, for much of this area is going to have a tough time getting above 30 for a daytime high. That's cold air that's coming down from Quebec. This is, you got to set up here where, you get that straight north wind coming down the Hudson Valley, a north or north-northeast wind. It could get very cold here, especially at night. So I actually love seeing setups like this, just for the curiosity of seeing how cold it winds up getting. Lots of snow in Austria. That's right. 5,000 subscribers with no videos. As Central Europe and Southern Europe have been taking the brunt of the cold air. Oh, thank you very much, Roselle, for hitting a super chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it, from Cape Cod. Thank you very much. I'm welcome to the channel if you're new. I don't recognize your name, so I'm thinking that you are new and on board. Thank you very much. Gets me down payment on a couple of cigars, and I really appreciate that. Let's see. They're forecasting not reaching 20. Timothy Veltman. This is also for you, upstate New York. This is where you get like ridiculous under certain circumstances. This is where parts of upstate New York can get really ridiculous below zero temperatures on a given morning. So watch Saturday morning. Let's watch the temperatures starting Friday morning, but especially Saturday morning. They could get, there could be some crazy off-the-wall temperatures in parts of upstate New York. Brandon Doherty, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. When is the secondary front coming through, Robert Hurley? You're going to probably see, you're going to have one front come through Tuesday night, probably another one come through later Wednesday night. Because it's really Thursday and beyond. It's still going to be a little bit of leftover mild air on Wednesday, although the temperatures are going to be trending down. But it's really Thursday and beyond that we're going to start to see the impacts of that big high. Bobby Livingsworth, the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, forecast to go into from 7 to 8, which is bullish for cold and snow in the eastern part of the United States. Let's see. Okay, so Kristen Pedia asking about a pending nor'easter. Nothing pending. We're talking about the possibility of some snow with a low on the coast over the weekend. I don't know that I wouldn't classify it as a nor'easter per se. At this point, we're still trying to figure out how far north it is going to get. Bobby Livingsworth, yes, the blizzard of 96 anniversary is today and yesterday, because it started on a Sunday. And the reason why I remember it so clearly was that I worked it from 9 a.m. Sunday when I left my house as the first flakes were falling, and I did not get home until 5 o'clock the next day when the last flakes fell. And if you go on my YouTube channel, and I put it up yesterday, but it is there, In fact, I will put it up here on the link for you. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to search it. Let me get you the page. But this is going to, you're going to see me from back in the day. In the blizzard of 96, someone actually found one of my first broadcasts on that particular day when I was working at News 12, and here's the link to it. So if you want to have a little bit of fun, you can go take a look at what I looked like 23 years ago as the blizzard of 96 was getting underway on Long Island. You will notice that my hair was every bit as fabulous then as it is now. So I did maintain that 1 degree of consistency, is that I kept fabulous hair all the way through these 23 years. All right, folks, we're coming up on the top of the hour at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We had a nice crowd tonight. I'm really glad. I love seeing nice big crowds coming up on the channel. If you're new, thanks for being here. Joseph Arabia. Oh, thanks, Joe. I really appreciate that. Happy New Year, and lots of luck to you on your retirement. Congratulations to you. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Let me, just threw me off. I was about to say, what the hell was I about to say? Oh boy, I forgot. It's one of the upsides of turning 60. You forget what you're going to say. And sometimes you forget where you are. All right, so going ahead for tonight, the Joe and Joe Weather Show is at 9:20. If you can't, or if you're not on Facebook, or if you miss it, I will put the replay up on YouTube either late tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, and you can watch it on the replay. Those of you who are on my app, you'll be able to see it there. If you've got an Android device, let me give you the link to that, and you can download it, and you can actually watch live streams on there anytime. The app is free. Just download it. It focuses mostly forecast-wise on the New York City, northern New Jersey, Long Island, lower Hudson Valley, and southern Connecticut area. But sometimes I do put up stuff that is a bit more broad in context in terms of long range. Plus, you also have, I have snow forecast maps up and down the entire East Coast that are updated by the Weather Service automatically, so you can access those on the app, satellites, radars, and so on. Again, absolutely free, and hopefully one of these days I'll have the iPhone version, and as soon as I do, I will certainly let you know what the link is for that. If you're interested in expanding your weather coverage and your weather experience, you can subscribe to my Patreon page, my weather platform on Patreon, which includes live streams just for Patreon members. You can message me anytime, plus you get a lot of extra posts and a lot of other stuff that you don't usually see on my website or on Facebook, and that's a subscription site. It just starts at $2 a month. And if you are, one easy way to support my channel, just one last thing here really fast, is that if you shop on Amazon and you use my link, and there it is, the Amazon link, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back a little bit of cigar stuff, and we're both happy. Thank you very much for those of you who are using it. Why is Apple taking so long? Part of the problem is, when there's something wrong, they don't tell that. If you've got a technical issue, they don't tell you what the issue is. They just tell you there's a technical issue, and they tell you to figure it out. So that eats up a ton of time. And then the submission process in and of itself takes up a lot of time. And on top of all that, technology companies, except for bare minimum staff, basically shut down from before Christmas till after New Year's. So I lost another 2 weeks there. So now I'm probably on a long waiting list with a whole bunch of other people waiting to get their stuff worked on and approved. So unfortunately, that's just kind of what the reality of it is. I don't have any, Justin Barrett, I don't have any library talk scheduled at the moment, but the next one is not until March, and that's going to be in Westwood, New Jersey. So when we get closer to the date, it's March 12th, Tuesday, March 12th. But when we get closer, I'll start talking about it, and I'll be giving out the information. So you've got the app, Brandon Doherty. Great. There's also going to be an update coming up for the Android app as well. So I'm kind of trying to do all these things at once. Very frustrating when you're working on all this, and I've got a wonderful guy that's been helping me with this, who's helped build, who's built the app for me and is handling all the technical stuff, Anthony Lucidi, and he's been just absolutely terrific. If you ever want somebody to do some tech work for you, he is the guy. So you can let me know, and I'll forward his information to you if you're looking for somebody to do some tech work for you. Do I think the storm on Sunday will be more suppressed or robust? Looked at today's afternoon run of the GFS. It showed big snowstorm. Yes, and then only to come in more suppressed. Although the parallel now went the other way. I look, if I had to guess, and that's all I'm doing right now. My judging from the standpoint of how the northern part of the jet stream is, I would kind of bet on a more suppressed look. So now that I've said that, you can bet on it being a more robust look. Okay, I'm just trying to, it's sometimes how I perceive things in a certain way, and it winds up coming up the opposite. It does. I am not perfect. I'm just kind of giving you my observations on all of this. But I think if you're a snow lover, you're going to want a more suppressed look, because you don't want an overdeveloped look. Otherwise, you get too much warm air coming off the ocean. So you want a more suppressed look, but you don't want it too suppressed, because if it's too suppressed, it's too far south. The cold, dry air overwhelms everything, and you wind up with nothing. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Hopefully, we'll see you on Facebook in about an hour and 15 minutes. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow.